really good sound. Hi everyone, it's Christy. How are you doing? I want to thank you for stopping by and showing up for this chat, which is just kind of like a spontaneous thing. Highly Critical and I, we DM each other on occasion. And we tried to set something up before and it didn't work out. And you reached out again. She reached out again. And we said, yeah, let's do something. So I wanted to introduce everybody in my audience who's not familiar with Highly Critical to Highly Critical. Welcome to here to my channel. I know you from our conversations before, but for my audience, people who might be meeting you for the first time, you want to tell us a little bit about you and your channel and the things that you talk about.
Hi guys, I am Highly Critical. So for my channel, I mainly talk about, I guess what some people would refer to as like social justice, although I don't really like calling it that. I mainly talk about, racism, sexism. I have a few videos on like fat phobia. And then I also write, like I have a blog that I write about. And then I have a few little pieces on like poetry and then like horror fiction that I'm working on. So if you like stuff like that, then you should definitely check me out.
Yep, the link is in the description box below, so go ahead and click on. Sorry, I muted myself and I was just pitching you. I'm sorry, I accidentally touched the wrong button. What I was saying was, the link for your channel is in the description box below. People can go right now and scroll down, click on that, open it in a new tab so that you don't close this window, and subscribe to her channel. But the first time I came across your content was actually when you were reacting to the Lawrence Krauss situation.
Oh, those were really fun times.
Yes. And I don't think that the secular community has really gotten that much better since.
No, I don't think so.
No, I think secularism and atheism, at least on YouTube, is still pretty much dominated by centrists who think they're progressives.
Yeah, and it's just like, can we call a spade a spade? Like, if you want to be conservative or, you want to be neutral to either side, that's cool, but do not label yourself as a liberal when you're clearly not.
Yeah. Like if you were liberal in the 1990s because you supported marriage equality and legalizing pot, and those are the only progressive views you still hold, you're not a progressive. You're actually conservative by this point.
Seriously, like, that's the only thing these people can say, like, oh, I support legalizing weed and I support gay marriage. But other than that, they're like, well, fuck women and fuck minorities. And we want a white ethno state and, no taxes, no regulation. And it's like, how are you a liberal again?
Yeah. You're just saying you're one. You aren't really one. But yeah, that's still a progress that we're chipping away at, trying to make keep. I appreciate the people inside the movement who are actively working to be inclusive, to enact their values, and who want to see diversity, inclusivity. It just feels like we're in the minority.
No kidding.
Yeah. But what are some of the other content? What is some of the other content you've done more recently? Just as a little bit of background.
Ooh,
Because
so
when you say racism or sexism, that can obviously be pretty broad. Those are broad categories. So let's hear some of your takes on those.
Ooh, so recently, I guess I've been a little bit more radical, I guess, as some people would say. Recently, I just finished up a two-part video series, I guess, about shouting out Black people. The first part, I spoke specifically about how, on the left, I think people focus on trying to address racism on the macro level, but sometimes we forget to address it on the micro level in regards to like individual people. So in the first part, I kind of go on a rant just saying how as a Black content creator on the left, it's a little bit harder for us to like get out there and to be known and to be supported as opposed to white creators. And then for part two, it's kind of longer, but I put timestamps in the description box where I shout out actual creators for other people to check out and to, become fans of.
That's cool. Yes, and I know also Cat Black did a video I mean, this is a long running theme in YouTube and also everywhere else in life, even in progressive movements. That when it comes to actual representation, actual human beings, you can talk a good game in the abstract, but how many Black content creators do you subscribe to? How many do you support? How many minutes per week do you listen or watch them, right? And there is that barrier when the audience, the demographic that consumes the content is skews white and male, that they aren't that audience doesn't seem to be as open to watching content creators who aren't like them as other people, as non-white guys are to watching white guys. It's always in the direction of it's fine to have a Joe Rogan or a Seth Andrews or a Matt Dillahunty, and they're expected to have very diverse audiences listening to them. But when it's someone standing up from, who doesn't fit that type, then suddenly it's supposed to be, oh, you're a niche, speak to your issues, and this is more of a niche audience. But it should really be equal in both directions, because there's no reason why, other than because of history of like racism and sexism, that those guys were advantaged to get those opportunities and are seen as authorities. So I understand exactly what the problem is, and also it's a big challenge to try to overcome it as well, because the people that you need their minds to be open are the ones whose their minds need to be open before they become open.
Yeah. And then I just want to point out, like, I was guilty of the same thing. Even after I addressed my own anti-Blackness, I was thinking, like, yeah, I'm pro-Black. Like, yeah, I'm fuck the system. But I looked at my subscription list and I'm like, whoa, like, there's not very many Black creators that I watch. So, I did my
Mm-hmm.
own digging and I found a whole lot of people. And it's like, yeah, even some other people that I've been watching, they've said similar things where it's harder for them, and they could be like in the beauty community, or they can be like a travel vlogger, and we have the same issues either way. So,
Yeah.
it's such an unconscious bias that we should just be aware of.
I mean, it's a minor bias in the other direction that's hardly enough to be felt, but I've been listening a lot to, since I've been getting into hip hop a lot more. I listen to a lot of reaction channels, and I do notice that I tend to skip over the white guys who are doing reactions. I do, and like I'll check out. There's okay, the most is Black men, and then there's some Black women and Black men together, like my dad reacts to, or couples that react to it. And then there are a couple of women of color that one in particular is great, who I subscribe to, who's just recently, I can't remember her name, but she only makes videos once in a while. And then sort of like the last on the list is like white guys. Although, I mean, I do watch them, like Indecently Decent. I like their stuff, but it's just like when I'm scrolling through, yeah, I'm just like, I just feel like maybe it's just an assumption that um, the white guys came to hip hop later, whereas people who grew up in urban areas have a deeper understanding because they've been listening to it since childhood, and they've got a family history. It's just like a depth of, I think, my assumed cultural association. So maybe that's a really bad bias on my part, but I don't think anyone's hurt in that case. I don't think the white guys are hurt by my bias. So
Oh no.
I
And
live
then,
with it.
like, what one thing that I learned, like, I've been listening to hip hop since I was like a kid, but even there's hip hop history facts that even I don't know. And I don't know if you heard of this channel, but Thought Crimes does a really great in-depth analysis to like hip hop history, and like what different beefs mean, and like what all the diss tracks and all that significant stuff means. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's always more stuff to learn about it.
There was also, I got YouTube Premium, and there's some good documentaries there on hip hop. And Netflix has been having actually some really good. Found some good hip hop documentaries there as well. And yeah, it is such a rich history. I mean, yeah, it really does. It's very expansive. It goes back to the 70s and the cultural conditions, and then the East Coast, West Coast, and the various regional things, and the various technological advances and lyrical advances. And oh my gosh, yeah, I mean, there's a there's a lot.
Oh
There's a lot to learn. And then the individual beefs, in the channels, and then battle rap channels and music channels and reaction channels. And yeah, I've really just completely fallen in love with hip hop, because
yeah.
it's absolutely the most dynamic, vibrant, creatively challenging um, genre of music that has existed. I realize now, since its invention, and it continues to be. It's like evolves at a much higher rate than any other musical genre that I can think of. A country music song today doesn't sound that different from the 80s. I mean, some of the instrumentation might be a little bit different, but generally it's the same kind of stuff and the same kind of content. Same thing with pop music. But
Oh,
hip hop,
yeah.
because it's so personal, I mean, maybe not the mumble rap stuff because that's obviously just like really super commercial and it's designed to have a great beat. You can dance to it. But where the origins come from, the authenticity of the experience and the individual accounts means that it's constantly a reflection of individual lives and new experiences and new perspectives. And then every generation kind of has its own take. And yeah, I mean, to me, it's just on like, it's like on warp speed in terms of creativity.
Oh, yeah. And then there's always new people to discover. And like, there's one rapper that I listen to, and he does like horrorcore. So, like, he raps almost like what you would see like in a horror movie.
That sounds like
And
Tech Nine stuff early. Is that kind of like what he was doing?
it's
Some
similar, but I would say it's even more hardcore than that.
okay. Who's the artist?
His name is Brother Lynch Hung, and I do want to put like not a trigger warning, but like a warning. He talks about like cannibalism and murdering people, but it's just fiction.
Right, right, yeah. It's
Yeah, so at first I was like, "Oh, this makes me really uncomfortable." But when you get used to it and you listen to his skill as a rapper, it's like, "Oh, he can rap. Like he's really skilled."
yeah. I watched. I mean, there's a lot. Obviously, there's uncomfortable content in lots of rap music. But I watched the film Bodied about rap battles. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a very complicated film. I don't want to get too much into it because I don't want to like take us off on a tangent. But one of the things that came out of it was, inside the arena of battle rap, anything goes. It's a sort of combat zone, and what you say inside the ring isn't necessarily what you would say outside of it. But if you're going to be doing like a lot of the metaphorical shootings and killings and stuff is meant to be contextualized within that. And I think a lot of white culture came to that and just thought they were talking about really killing people. Now, sometimes there are stories about killing people because they're true stories and whatever else. But I think white people not knowing about battle rap or the history, especially like Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore, and the whole censorship movement, and Two Live Crew didn't help. But but yeah, I think understanding that a lot of that's not meant to be taken literally. People are playing or they're using the words in a rhyme scheme because they rhyme and it's not meant to be a real thing. But yeah, and so that was like a real light on in my head of like, here was me as a performer, right? And then here is me as a person in that. And my lyrics are about ideas and you can play with ideas.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who hate rap, they forget that rap is from like spoken word poetry. So it's not supposed to be taken literally. But going back to like the 90s and stuff, I think when they would talk about dealing drugs and stuff, that probably was more true. But the only rappers who literally talk about killing other folks are like the newer ones that come out today, and they always get hemmed up on their own charges. So I don't think they're
Yeah.
worth listening to anyway.
Yeah. 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 All right. I don't know how we got off on this tangent, but I'm glad we did because I often bring up hip hop and rap when I'm with Kevin, and he winds me up about it. And it's just as a wind up. He enjoys it as well, but he just thinks it's sort of like a middle aged white woman suddenly discovered hip hop, which is kind of funny. But I'm also, and this was something I was reflecting on in our conversation because of, like the whole idea of feeling excluded from content and how that is an experience. So when I listen to hip hop music, it is not something I can relate to. It is not my experience. And so I have to make a little bit more of an effort to try to connect with it. Not that I can't, but I just don't have a natural, effortless, unconscious framework. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Of
I
some of
I
the
get
things,
that.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think because white culture is so offers you a way to associate with the hero, with an Iron Man, with a Marvel, Captain Marvel. White people don't have to make an effort to identify with that, but with a Black Panther, now suddenly they have to make this little bit of effort. And I was like, but people of color make that effort all the time,
All the time.
all the time. Yeah. And that's like, it was like another a little light bulb moment to me. And I haven't let that effort stop me from liking hip hop or listening to it, but realizing that, yeah, that's probably where a lot of people just check out because they're not self-aware enough to say, okay, well, because I don't have a framework for it, this doesn't mean I can't listen to it, or I can't relate to it, or I can't enjoy it, or I can't buy it or go to the concert, And I think that, yeah, it's a kind of default laziness almost. Maybe that might be a slight interference because, or a strangeness that white people aren't used to, because most white people across America, big cities obviously an exception, walk into a room and everybody in that room looks like them.
Yeah, and that might be one reason why mumble rap is so commercialized. Like, they're not really speaking of anything of substance in their raps. They're just talking about, bitches and hoes and getting money and partying and doing drugs. And that's, relatable across any
Mm.
background. So,
Yeah, and you can just focus on the beat and the
yeah.
bounce. Ooh,
Yeah.
ooh, yeah. All right. Well, that was an interesting side conversation, but we were actually here to talk. We decided in the last day about Joe Biden, and I changed the title, although it doesn't look like it took inside the chat, but it was like, should Joe Biden be canceled or something along those lines, to be slightly provocative. But Joe is so dodgy. So I guess what I should do here first is I will share my screen. Hold on, I wanna. Oh, I can't do both at once. Okay. Hold on. I just realized that if I show my screen, see the Hangout address, and I don't want us to get bombarded by trolls. So I'm just going to narrow that screen a little bit so the full address isn't showing, and then I can share my screen. Okay, there we go. All right, hello everyone. So I don't know if you've been keeping up with it, or if you're not in the States, you might not know. So I'll give you a little bit of background, and then Highly Critical and I will talk about it. Joe Biden is currently the frontrunner for the Democratic nomination. He is around like the 30s and 40s% in most polls. But I'm sure this will come up a month ago, maybe? I don't know. I can't tell time anymore in politics. Everything seems to take a lifetime and then also just happens. So it's really weird. But Joe Biden had some problems with how he interacts with women. And there was a little bit of a discussion about how he interacts with them, and he hasn't really seemed to learn the lesson, but we'll come on to that. Now he's really stuck his foot in it again. Biden was at a New York fundraiser, and he was recalling that there was at least some civility when he worked with segregationists in the Senate, and that one of those senators never called me boy, he always called me son. Now, Joe here is thinking that he's making a point about civility in the Senate, and that you can work with people that you disagree with, even segregationists. There's a little bit of a problem with that, though, as I learned when I was listening to a discussion on Morning Joe today. And that was one of the people he mentioned by name, Joe Biden mentioned by name, was a guy named James Eastland. And this guy was a Democrat. He was not a Republican. Joe Biden was like a junior or freshman member of Congress, and he was trying to negotiate with a segregationist in his own party. So his point about like civility doesn't really apply even to cross-party stuff. So it also kind of negates the whole importance of civility, considering this was an inter-party conversation. But also, Joe doesn't seem to realize that the reason why he was being called son and not boy is because he was white. And had he been Joe Biden but not white, he would have been called boy. So the civility was granted because of his skin color and his party affiliation, not just because he spoke in very nice tones. But Joe doesn't seem to understand this. Joe, when people were, I guess I can use the modern phrase, or the side-eyed him, and other people spoke up and said, Joe, what are you talking about? Why would you bring up this? And why would you bring up this phrase? He pushed back. So Cory Booker called him out particularly to say that he thought it was not a really good story to tell, and that was a very painful time in American history, and a lot of people who were hurt by this. And another person who wasn't Cory Booker but made a really good point, again, I think it was on Morning Joe, that when we talk about these compromises, like Joe Biden was working on this compromise, who paid for the compromises? And it wasn't white middle class families who kind of paid for the crime bill compromises or the other compromises that Democrats have made in the Senate, in the House over the years in the White House. So Cory Booker asked him to apologize for kind of like not getting it. I don't have his apology particularly, but Joe Biden was then asked about it, and Joe Biden got all assy. The whole like, oh, I've done so much. I'm such a good white guy. I should be praised. No one, especially no one of color, should ever question that I'm not a racist. Kind of old white dude attitude. And he won't. He said Cory Booker. Joe Biden said Cory Booker should apologize to him for having the temerity, apparently, of questioning his non-racistness after bragging about being called son and not boy. So, I'm sorry. Like, this is some bullshit going on right here, and we need to talk about this. So, I kind of think I've drifted out of neutral commentary into clearly Christy has an opinion. I think Joe Biden is really deluded. But before I go on, because I've been talking a lot, I want to kick it over to you to see, yeah, what are some of your thoughts and reactions? Also, if I missed out any of the story that you know the details, please fill them in.
Yeah, so I think somebody described Joe Biden as somebody's like drunk uncle. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and I don't think there could be a better phrase to describe him. He is just, I honestly didn't think that there could be a worse candidate than like Bernie Sanders. But here comes Joe, like making Sanders looking
Joe's like,
better and
hey,
better.
Bernie, hold my beer.
Literally, like I wouldn't be surprised if Sanders like paid Biden to run just to make him look better. Like it just gets worse and worse every day with him. And then like with that whole boy thing, like I don't think people really understand because I've seen people online, especially like white guys, be like, "Oh, well, what's the problem with being called a boy?" And it's like, well, back before like the civil rights era, grown white men would call other grown black men boy.
Yeah.
And it's become like a specific racially charged phrase to demean the adulthood of a black man. And while that type of racism was directed specifically towards black men, I want people to realize that black women also felt the effects of that because black men were emasculated by white men. There was no way that black men could reinforce their masculinity or defend it. So they would go to the black woman that would be waiting for him at home and enact violence towards her. So it's just like all black people felt that type of racialized violence and it perpetuated a lot of trauma within our community. So for Biden to be so callous and to be so apathetic, to be like, well, I was called son, like, yeah, because white people humanize each other. You know, we know that with white people, they can look at another white person and see their family member or see their cousin or, you know, their aunt, nephew, their niece or whatever. But I don't understand why he would even bring that up. Like, how do those ideas correlate with each other? Like, I wish Joe would just shut up sometimes.
Yeah, he really, if he ran a campaign where he never spoke, that would actually be probably the most successful campaign he would ever have because he is his own worst enemy. I said this months ago because I remember him from the primaries before Obama knocked him out, and he was just as bad. He's constantly putting his foot in it. So we just have to wait and Joe will mess himself up. Um,
And then it's weird how he's literally campaigning on 4 more years of Obama, but it's like Obama wasn't this sloppy. Like, oh, if Obama was doing this, he would have never been elected.
I don't even know what Joe Biden, other than changing his mind on the Hyde Amendment, is running on. I really don't. He's Joe Biden. That's the only thing I mean, to be fair, I haven't really looked up too much about his campaign. I've just been following news headlines, and we're waiting for the first debates. Obviously, those will kind of clear the field, I think, a little bit by the second one for sure. But yeah, I mean, this Joe, it's the same core that was his problem with how he was touching women, and it's this self-righteous I'm a good person, white personness. And this is why I brought up the movie Bodied before, because this was actually a kind of a central theme in the film Bodied. So Bodied is about this white kid. He's a master's student. He's writing his master's thesis, so he's actually a young man. But he is in love with hip hop and he loves the hip hop scene. And he wants to do his master's thesis on the N word in battle rap. So that's the sort of his motivation as a character. And he attends these battle reps where he meets the other characters. And the other main character is a rapper. So he's a white guy. He's a black rapper, and he kind of the black rapper is well known in the scene, and the white guy can do a couple bars, and so he kind of brings him in and kind of gets him started on the circuit. But as a consequence, the other part of the film is that he's going to Berkeley. So the film has kind of extreme SJW type critiques of battle rap and the content of battle rap, but also the perspective of the battle rappers and the rules of battle rap and how respect is earned. And it's through, lyricism and rhyme and wit and thinking, all that kind of stuff. And over the course of it, the white guys keeps wanting to say I'm not racist. I say these things in the arena that are racist, but I'm not. I'm a good person. And I won't give much of the plot away because you should experience it. And the battle rap at the end just kicks the ass of 8 Mile. So, I mean, it's just a phenomenal ending. But at the end, his black, mentor at that point, that's the role he played, said, "You're not a good person. You can't be doing this and be a good person." And so it was just really speaking to me personally as a white person of that whole sort of like, I don't want to be perceived as a racist. But that didn't move me to racial justice. That desire to say, oh, I'm not saying racist things, I don't have racist attitudes, wasn't enough to impel me into criticizing the structures. And I think in this case, the white character, and then I'll be done. He was very desperate to be seen as that good white person and not realize, and it wasn't until the end that he realized that whole thing was just a barrier and a myth and bullshit anyway. So, yeah, that was what I was thinking about.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, I think for most, well, I won't say for most, I think for some Black people in the hip hop community, as long as you don't say nigga, we will be okay. Like, that's one of the reasons why Eminem was like pretty accepted for the most part. There's always going to be backlash and people accusing him of succeeding because he's white. But as long as he just didn't say nigga, everybody's pretty much okay. But it sounds like the main character was kind of racially trolling. You know how somebody will, they'll say nigger, but then be like, oh, just a joke, it's a joke. And it's like, well,
Oh,
even if it's a joke,
I
like
should
the
say the main
basis.
character never said that word. Well, it's kind of weird. There's a conversation where they're talking about its use in battle rap, and the black character says, "Just say the word," and then they say it a little bit, but he never uses it in a rap. He never uses it in a battle rap. I should just say that. So that conversation was kind of a part of it, but just to be clear, but I know what you mean. That white people think that they can use it in certain contexts, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to clarify that. So please continue, and apologies.
Oh yeah, no, that's okay. But yeah, I guess a more accurate example would be Sargon calling white
Oh,
people a pack of niggers. It's like, it doesn't matter that you're using that term towards white people, it's still greatly offensive. Like, that shouldn't be a part of your vocabulary at all.
he made it worse actually, and this tweet didn't get as much attention. But I actually think in some ways this should have gotten as much attention. He tweeted out, and I have a copy of it, so I can post it to Twitter if you want to see the receipts. Something very close to the lines of, "Dear Black people, I'm sorry that I used your special word. I won't use it again in future," or something like that. But he did call it your special word. And I was like, you are such an asshole. You are such a racist piece of shit.
I mean, this is why I don't like British people talking about like American issues, because
Mm.
he hasn't grown up here and he doesn't even realize how charged that word really, really is. Like, we didn't originate that word. We didn't just start calling ourselves that. Like, that's what white people called us. And it got so repetitive that if you read certain narratives, we started to refer to ourselves as niggers, just no good niggas, and I'm just a poor nigga, and it just got ingrained into our own psyche. So it's not, I promise you, it's not our special word. Like, it's not something that we
Yeah.
cherish and, oh, this is our treasured possession. Like, no, this is something that got ingrained in us, and we reclaimed it as being a more friendly type of term. And whenever a white person uses it, it just takes away that familiarity that we put into that word.
Yeah, and I think that's an entirely valid point. He doesn't know the context or the history. None of that. He doesn't understand. He doesn't even make an effort to understand that pain, from what I
No,
see.
he's such a pompous ass. I really dislike Sargon.
Does anybody other than his fanboys like? I mean, he's pissed off everyone from the alt right to anarchists. Like he's managed to be such an asshole that like every across the political spectrum, unless you agree with him, it's not that you just disagree with him, you actively dislike him.
Well, even if you agree with him, I'm sure he's not pleasant to like interact with.
That's true. Yeah, but moving on. Yeah. So yeah, coming back to, sorry, the main point in the topic. Yeah, I think that, Cory Booker took the moment, and he made some really good points, I thought. And it's not about, oh, Joe Biden, you're a racist. It's, hey, Joe, that was a kind of callous and insensitive thing to say, and I'm telling you why. And what is especially disappointing is that Joe again is resisting feedback from the very people affected by his actions or his words.
You know, that reminds me of that picture that was taken of that woman who confronted him about, I think it was the Hyman Amendment, and he like stuck his finger in her
Oh,
face.
the Hyde Amendment. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that was like, whoa, dude.
Yeah.
Like, if there was anything that you should not have done, was that, because that picture just speaks volumes about his attitudes towards other people.
People make fun of Bill Clinton because he does that weird sort of closed palm thing with his thumb on the top of his fist, when he talks. I don't know if you can picture Bill Clinton, but he would use the thing where he'd take his like first finger and his thumb and kind of pinch them together and close his fist and sort of point with his general fist at people. And he does that because when he started campaigning, he was pointing at people in the audience. And his handler said, when you point at someone directly, it's really aggressive. Now, I know
Mhm.
what you don't pointing at that person or calling them out. You're emphasizing your point. Just take your finger back. Don't point your finger.
Yeah, pointing at people is rude.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is very aggressive. I mean, sometimes that's what you want to do, but and then maybe that's what you intend to do. But yeah, if you just do it because reflexively, and then it's caught on camera and you're a politician, oof,
Yeah, just as a politician, you don't want to be that aggressive.
right. Yes. And Joe was also really resistant when people told him that the way he touched women or interacted in a very familiar way with women in the way that he didn't with men was sexist, because he's treating them differently because he's making assumptions about his intimacy level with them because they're a woman. Oh, she's nice. I can kind of get in closer with her physical space. Whereas he would respect the personal boundary space of a man. He wouldn't rub his shoulders in the middle of a press conference. Right. And it sort of doesn't even, it's not, the point isn't if the woman objected or not. It just looks weird it looks at his body language and the way he interacts. Because, and then he made some squawks that made it appear that he was trying to get it, I'll say. But then a couple weeks ago, he was at an event and talking to a woman. At the end, she hugged him. And as he pulled away, he said, "Media, media, remember she initiated it. She started,
Oh my God.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
He is just,
yes,
he's so
yes,
cringeworthy. Like, if Joe was in an office working with people, what he does would be considered sexual harassment. Like, and especially kudos to those other women. Like, I don't know if they wanted to pull away, but I am very particular about who can touch me, and having a strange man rub my shoulders is just like, ooh, like I couldn't. That's
yeah.
just out of
Now,
line.
apparently, the two of them, like, they knew each other. He knew the woman, but even so, like, that was a shoulder rub in the middle of a White House press conference. it's just not professional, you know, and it also makes her look really weird too in relation to him, you know. So there's a lot of power dynamics and impressions that he's not getting. And yeah, and this stubbornness of recognizing, hearing what other people are really saying. I mean, maybe he's just kind of, you know, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I'm trying to do something that doesn't sound too ageist, but I kind of hope for the future. But at least now it does seem that between the two front runners now, Elizabeth Warren is rising up in the polls. Now, personally, I'm Team Harris myself, and she's in the top 5. I think she's going to be like, she's a marathon runner with Kamala. In my opinion, you got to wait for a while. She's going to
Well,
show up in the debates and she's going to be amazing. But yeah, Warren is moving up now to second place, overtaking Sanders in recent polling.
either one, either Harris or Warren. I
Yeah,
want
yeah,
either one of them,
I'd find
honestly.
that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone else is just, they're all right, I guess. But Biden and Sanders specifically, like, I will grit my teeth if they become the nominee. I'll vote for him anyway, but I will grit my teeth. I don't want it.
I hear you. A lot of teeth gritting. You're right. Definitely. Yeah. But, I don't quite get the Mayor Pete phenomenon.
Uh, uh, I kind of look at it as, instead of the regular mayo variety, we want like the spicy mayo. And it's like, you know, I totally get and I totally agree that we do need an openly gay person in the White House. I totally agree with that. But other than that, I don't see what Mayor Pete has to offer. And then I also kind of get the feeling that he's trying to appeal to centrists a little bit too much to be as progressive as I want my candidate to be.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. I think, you know, I agree that I think the diversity of our field is really exciting. I just, you know, like a mayor running for president, I personally, and I think it does take some getting elected on a statewide level, getting elected to a federal office, to having some experience. So for me, I mean, maybe this is the first time he's going to run, and then fair enough. You know, he's going to get some national exposure. He's going to be great. But if he was, I would just be worried about the experience level kind of questions that would come up from someone who is a mayor. Because I'm trying to think, you know, Obama obviously was in the Senate.
Mhm.
Clinton was a governor. Carter was a governor. I can't think of anyone who was ever elected, even from the House of Representatives. I think every president has either been a governor or a senator. And there's a reason for that. It's because they've been elected at a state to statewide office.
Yeah, but I mean, after Trump, anybody can get
That's
elected
true.
now.
Well, yeah, if you're, yeah, I forget that Trump kind of is always the exception to the rules of politics.
Yeah, like before, I used to be like, being the president is such a prestigious office, that would take a whole lot of things and experience and education. Now I'm just like, well, hell, I could be president
Yeah.
now.
You do a much better job. You would take it so much more seriously and spend so much less time golfing.
Yeah,
I'll
and I'm
vote for you.
articulate. I mean, he
Yes.
can barely string a sentence together.
And when he does, it's aimed at about a fourth grade level. Everything is terrific or terrible.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that was the one topic I had. I don't know. I feel like we've kind of so. I mean, Joe obviously Joe isn't going to be canceled. He's a front runner, so that was a little bit of a clickbait title. But should he be thought about being canceled by more people? You know, I think so.
Yeah, I would say his actions towards women should definitely disqualify him as a serious candidate. I don't understand how, especially as the Democratic Party and liberals in general, were fresh off the heels, I guess you could say, of the Me Too movement, and it's still, it's left its permanent mark on our culture now. So it's just really weird to me that we can demand that men start acting more appropriately towards women and to think about how they treat us um, in, public manner and then personal manners. But at the same time, we would support someone like Joe Biden. Like, that seems contradictory to me.
Yeah. There's also, now that we're talking about it, it makes me wonder if his flip flop on the Hyde Amendment wasn't in part a way to as a response to women running. You've got Klobuchar, Warren, Harris, right? And when women talk about women's issues to women who disproportionately vote for the Democratic Party, that's a natural connection, right? That's a sort of relatability to a part of the voter base that Joe doesn't have that natural relatability, even if he wants to have the touchability. He doesn't have that. And so maybe taking a very sudden and abrupt shift position on the Hyde Amendment was in some ways his attempt to try to solidify a connection with women voters, in which case that just shows the importance of having women running for office. That presence, just mere presence of women as competition, has a calculus change that wouldn't have been there if it was all men, even if one of the guys took a different position on the Hyde Amendment, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, it's reasonable now to question how much he actually champions women's issues and women's rights, you know? Like for him to be so defensive about it is just irrational to me because it's like, everyone can change their mind. That's normal. That's actually a good thing. But at the same time, you're in the middle of your campaign, Joe. You didn't think about this before?
I don't think he's had to. I
Yeah.
don't think he's had to think about this before. And this is also part of the presence thing. I think Cory Booker's presence and speaking up as a candidate from his perspective and also on behalf of a community that has, he's experienced that kind of, I'm sure, the kind of boy racism, which, to me, I don't know if it was Roots, because I'm old enough to remember Roots being aired on television, or other movies I've watched with slavery. But it's always been clear to me that that boy spoken by a white Southern man to a black man was always had a bar of contempt to it. But maybe millennials just haven't been exposed to that kind of historical presentations of the term. I mean, it's certainly not something you're going to cover in a history book, unfortunately. That kind of experience of racism doesn't get covered, in civics courses. So it has to come through the medium of entertainment to, I think, be a bit more relatable. How did I get on this? I'm sorry, I'm rambling. Anyway, we're talking about Joe, and do you want to jump in here and help me out?
Yeah, I mean, if we can go on Joe and his racial issues, it's just, like you said, it goes back to the relatability thing and his inability to just listen to other people and to not be so defensive. Like, I don't think he's really capable. I honestly believe he just wants to um, be an option for the same people who voted for Obama, but who turned around and voted for Trump. I think he wants to comfort a lot of the older white demographic, the baby boomers who don't want to be too progressive with their political choices. Man, he feels like, it just feels like to me, he just feels like he's going to get the undecided vote just because, And that's why I feel like his campaign is really just lazy and sloppy. Like,
Mm. Yeah. Okay. You made so many good points. Okay. One, I remembered I was going to expand on a point you made earlier when I started on my little narrative and then I got stuck down the Cory Booker rabbit hole and lost my train of thought, which was, oh no, that's not gone again. It had to go to Joe Biden and, dang it. Oh, yes. He can have a great voting record on women's issues. If Joe Biden, I'm sure he did, voted for the Violence Against Women Act every time it came up, that's great on your legislative record. But if you still have really, regressive attitudes, at this point in the Democratic primary, a lot of these candidates have great voting records. So we don't need someone who votes insincerely for issues just to, have the women's vote or to get the vote from the African American community. We have people who actually believe the things that are behind the bills and live them. And it doesn't feel like Joe really lives them. He feels very much like a guy who is going for, as you point out, white voters in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Wisconsin and Michigan. He's not sort of running as somebody who's connected with where the Democratic Party is, where America is right now in the Democratic Party, which is, it is more left. And trying to be more inclusive and moving things forward. Yeah, he just seems like a man out of time, really. And we have other options. So I think what might happen, because the Democratic primary voters are the most engaged and the most informed and the most likely to vote, you're not going to get that many people just showing up on name recognition in I would say states that aren't like, say, open primary. Like a state like Wisconsin, anyone who wanted to go vote in the Democratic primary and was could vote same day registration, unless they've gotten rid of that now, or had registered, could go and vote in the Democratic primary. You could do it on the day if you wanted to. And those people might vote for Biden. But in, I think, caucus states and closed primary states where you have to declare a party in order to be able to be eligible to vote in the primary, I think he's actually going to do less well, because there are so many other options, and the base is engaged with a lot of other candidates besides Biden who are closer to their own political positions. So I think he's not a shoo-in, and he's showing vulnerability the more we go on.
I mean, I hope he doesn't get chosen, but I mean, after all the damage Trump has done, it's not enough to be a blue dog Democrat. It's not enough to be a centrist with these issues. I feel like we really need to lean more progressive for us to not only undo the damage Trump has done, but to also move forward as a country.
Yes, I totally agree. Now I can tell you from polling, if you ask people who say they identify as Democrats, that's not to say that they're active in the Democratic primary. Do you know what I mean? Like, just because you
Mhm.
vote for the Democratic Party and you think of yourself as a Democrat doesn't mean you're following this stuff like we are. You
Right.
know, that's probably like 20% of the 35%. 15% aren't really checked in. Um, but I think for those of us who are checked in, yeah, there's a reason why Warren is moving up, and she's been coming up with some really solid policies that are connecting with people. And also, she does have that connection and that sincerity, you know.
Yeah,
So
and I love her slogan so far, which is like, she has a plan for that. I love that. I love how she's like able to let everybody know, like, this is what I want to do. This is how I would do it. This is how it would work out, as opposed to Joe, who's just like, herp or derp, just 4 more years of Obama.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Yeah, and he'll get the name recognition boost, but I think that that name recognition boost will have less and less currency politically as the debate goes on, because, or sorry, as the campaign goes on, because one, I think the debates they're going to be the media circuses, and they're going to have, like they always do, very temporary ephemeral effects. I mean, very rarely does something happen that really destroys somebody's candidacy on a debate stage. Candidates are too careful for that. But if they can have these little breakout moments that the media picks up on, and then they catch a little fire, and then they make it to the next debate, right? So I think that as people kind of catch fire, you're going to see they're all going to be eating into the Joe Biden base, because I think it's the softest base there is. I mean, like me, like I liked, I was Team Harris a lot. Like basically by the time she announced, I was like, yes, I was hoping this would happen, because I think she would be a really great counter to Trump. I think on a debate stage, she would be so poised and just such a contrast to him in every way. And I think her, also the ads would be, like I think she would be just such a great contrast. But so would Warren. Again, I'm with you in terms of the top two, who I would be happiest with. But people who've been with Warren since the beginning or early on, they're the ones who are going to stick with Warren or Harris or Booker. But Joe came in late. Joe didn't do any fundraising before he joined. He didn't have a sort of institution. He didn't have a structure, his campaign structure set up before he announced. And a lot of the people who were good Democratic talent in terms of campaign staff were already hired, because there were so many other candidates. And his campaign sounds like it's having problems. So we might just watch him flame out if he doesn't do maybe like a sort of John McCain correction. If you remember, John McCain ended up having to like do a really serious self-correction in the primaries when he ended up winning. But yeah, I don't. Joe's not skyrocketing. He's not rising in the polls. He's just sort of hanging out. You know.
Yeah, I hope Joe takes himself out. That would be like the best case scenario. But I do have a couple of questions for you.
Oh, okay.
First, how would you respond to people who say that, Kamala Harris is a cop? You know?
Yeah.
A lot of people complain about how she had that one initiative in the Black community where she was like threatening to send parents to jail for not sending their kids to school. And my perspective on that was it was more like encouraging them to take school attendance more seriously. But I've seen a lot of people say like she actually sent a few folks to jail on that.
Yeah, I
So
looked into that because that was a criticism I was seeing a lot, and it looked like the program was meant for the parents of children whose kids were like extremely absent. Like their absences were ruining their academic careers. And the first stage was talking to them and working with them. And I think that most families actually ended up having the students back in school. And I remember, I think it's off the top of my head, but there was one person who like went to court about it. I don't know if they went to jail, but they went to court about it. Their child had missed 45 days of school.
that's like, isn't that like a fourth or a third of the school year?
Yeah, and this is we're getting to the point where it's criminal not neglect in terms of physical abuse, but you're the not having that having not making an effort of getting your child in school is going to ruin their lives, right?
Yeah.
And so when I looked into it further, I realized that it was not at all what was being presented. And if I would have known we would have talked about it, I would have looked up the I don't know if it was a Snopes thing or a Vox article or whatever, but they went and looked at it and they said, here is the good, here is the bad, here are the facts on it. And so what was being pushed around Twitter was an oversimplification and also taking a very extreme case without talking about the fact that, again, the child had missed like 45 days of school. It was something very large, you know? It wasn't like a 3-day absence or even a 17-day absence. So, and as far as that goes, I think also with Kamala, people tend to just focus on what she did when she was in the prosecutor's office, which she wasn't entirely a free agent, and also she was responding to things that the voters were responding to. But I look at her record since she's been in the Senate because she's not running for attorney general. She's she's running for president, and if you look at her positions now, she is great on all of the issues. And so it to me, when people pull up her past, it's like, well, if that's what you're going to, then her Senate record can't really have any problems, can it? So it tends that's what I don't think that the things that came up when she was prosecuting are going to come up as president. So
Yeah, I just see, mainly a lot of Black people on Twitter, a lot of their go to is Kamala's a cop. And it's like, well, as a prosecutor, what do you want her to do? Like, and there are actual criminals that she was sending to jail.
yeah,
So, I mean, I didn't really get that either. But my second question, though, was because with the Democratic primary debates, it's split up into two groups.
right.
How well do you think Warren is going to do being in the first group?
This is going to be a really interesting night. I don't know. I think I can't think of a candidate that I've seen that's in the top, let's say 10, that's inarticulate or able unable to explain themselves well. I think all of those, especially people from the Senate, are going to be very comfortable in a debate situation because it will be like speaking out of the well of the Senate, at the podium. So I think maybe governors, if we had any, or mayors who only speak at podiums, maybe at press conferences, might find that situation slightly more different or slightly different. But no, I can't. I can't. What's your thoughts on that? Since you asked the question, did you have something in mind?
Um, well, I know like the first group has a lot more people that are like have lower recognition in terms of like the Democratic primary, as opposed to the second group, which has the Biden, Sanders, Harris,
Right.
Gillibrand, Buttigieg, and then Andrew Yang. So I mean, I would hope that because Warren might be the most recognizable name out of the first group, as opposed to like Booker or O'Rourke. But I would hope that that would give her an edge.
I think maybe the scare I would have if I were in Warren's camp is that people might tune in more for the bigger debate than the smaller one. But I think that there's enough interest in the people you met on both stages to be honest, because Beto O'Rourke was kind of a bit of a rock star. Cory Booker's got his own, I think, much smaller following, but people kind of, I think, well, if you're into politics, you know who he is. But when you, so part of the thing too is you have the advantage of me. I didn't know the lineup, so thank you very much for providing that information. And it also might depend too on how they structure it, because if they are pretty strict to the time, or if the Democrats are quite deferential and don't talk over each other's time or don't interrupt each other and spar, then it might be a very controlled thing where she, just has her little moments and they're spread out against everybody else's. So I don't quite know what the interactions might be. And of course, the other thing they do on stage is, they always frame people so they look the exact same height. So there's and other kind of camera tricks, they pull, like maybe where she's going to be on the stage might, if she's always looking to the side, it might be more awkward than if she's facing out to the, audience, depending on if she's the far edges of the debate stage. So I don't know, but I don't, nothing, she's got the talent, she's got the ability, and she's got the policies. So she could stand out, definitely.
I hope so, because even back like in 2016, everybody wanted her to run, but she's like, no, 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 and it's like this is her time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she weathered the whole, slur of Trump, and that's not seemed to knock her back or whatever. And it's not affecting her perception of electability in the Democratic primary anyway. And let's face it, Trump insults everyone. So, and every Democratic candidate is going to get a nickname from him. Hers is just already established. And I don't know if he's going to be able to carry that on, though, to be honest. I think if he keeps using that slur, or that, calling her Pocahontas, it will be an issue that dogs him as well. It might become an issue on its own. So we'll see what Donald does.
Yeah, I'm just glad a lot of minorities aren't falling for it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because at first people were like, well, even myself, at first I was like, well, why did she identify as Native American? But, after listening to, Serious Inquiries Only with Thomas Smith and how he broke down that whole issue with what she did, it's not so much of an issue as it was when it first came out.
Yeah. And also, there's this thing, like a lot of white people do, like, oh, I'm Norwegian and French and Native American and this, that, and the 15 different things. And it's all based on oral history from your family. You have no idea what your genetic composition is. And most people just take whatever their family history story is at face value, whatever they're told.
Oh,
And
yeah.
from my understanding, she was told that this was part of her heritage. So,
Yeah. I mean, it happens even with with Black people. Because I think even with my family, I think we have Native American in our blood. And it's pretty easy to assume we have some percentage of white, but it's not like we're going to pay to have ancestry.com tell us the exact percentage.
yeah. I mean, unless you're into genealogy and that stuff is exciting to you, but yeah, that's not how it works. So,
Yeah.
so what are you going to be looking for in the debates?
Ooh, well, I would say one of my pet issues right now is reparations. Like a candidate who does not support some type of a plan for reparations, it's going to be harder for them to get my support.
I would love to hear your take on that, because I am also very open, very like supportive of various possible ways of doing reparations. But I would like to hear your thoughts on it since you brought it up.
Yeah, so I mean, I there are a bunch of different ways that people try to break down what is owed and what is due. And I'm open to like a lot of different solutions. I know some people have said to just, maybe to write off Black people's taxes for a few years. And after a while, that would add up to what reparations would be owed. Some other people mentioned giving us bonds or, giving us stock options that would eventually equal that amount. People who say like, oh, just cut me a check, like that's not exactly what most people would expect from the government, especially with how much in debt as a country we really are. I would look for maybe some options to either own land or to like own homes. Um, maybe like to give free college or to write off college tuition for the Black community. That would also be a really great option. Um, just creative solutions like that, that over time would not only repay what is owed to us, but would give us like a step up from the disadvantages we've had in this country.
Yeah, another aspect I've heard, I think it was, again, it might have been on Morning Joe. It made it sound super progressive, but it was just some of the guests were progressive on Morning Joe. But the, investment in historically Black colleges or investment in education, so not just individual level reparations, but also structural investments through, like putting federal tax dollars into, urban schools, raising wages, raising classrooms, so that it's not, so that the system, it's not just a temporary fix. It's not like winning the lottery. You need to start to address that, and that could be considered not, like a separate part of it, but also like recognizing that it's also the institutions that have played the role in perpetuating the poverty. When people were promised, was it 40 acres and a mule or whatever, and then the
Yeah.
war ended, and people were just basically said, "Okay, you're free."
Yep.
And that was it. No compensation for their years of labor, for their family, the separations, for the emotional pain or trauma, no investment in education or in skills, like literally just abandoned.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we have, and the reason why we have a large, higher unemployment in the African American community is directly because of that shit. So if we sort that out, if we help the community up, then that lifts everybody's vote. It's not like taking from us to give to people for something that happened. Like white people are still benefiting from that too, like that whole institutional racism. Um,
Yep.
yeah, and so we haven't come to grips with our national sin, and anyone who says, we shouldn't have to pay for the sins of or what happened in the past, like, but you are, other Black families are, every African American descendant uh, who are still in the States, they are still suffering because of that. So if you're saying we don't have to make reparations, it's still ongoing. It didn't end because white people don't feel the effects of it anymore. And that's what's. Uh, I wish I had been much more racially conscious in terms of justice issues much earlier on in my life. I feel like I'm coming to this game late, but at least I'm here. Um, and yeah, like there's just shit we need to sort out within the white community about how we relate to our own history. And obviously it's like, white people have to say it to the kind of white people who need to hear it.
Yeah. And I totally feel you when it comes to being more conscious about these issues because in high school, they purposefully whitewash a lot of the
They
history.
yeah.
And I feel like that's part of the biggest problem is that people don't understand how deep these issues run. And just to go on a little side tangent, fuck Mitch McConnell
Oh, all
because
day, every day with no lube.
yeah, his comments were so insensitive to
Oh,
say, well, it was such a long time ago. You turtlenecked bitch. How dare you? Like you already said, we're still feeling the effects.
yes.
For him to even bring up the election of Obama as some sort of fucking repayment. First of all, he's not even
Oh,
fully Black. Second of all, he has to be the most respectable, the most presentable Black man that this country could ever produce
and
if
he
you
shit
really
on him
want to
all day
repay
long.
us.
Sorry.
Right. No, no, you're right though. And if you really want to repay the Black community by electing a Black person, I want the most niggitiest nigga that you can find. I want the most hood rat, the most from the dirtiest projects to
You
come up
want
in there
Snoop?
with hell yeah, even more ghetto than Snoop. I want gold teeth, gold chains, cornrows, do rags, saggy jeans. I want white people to clutch their pearls at our brand new blackity black president if you really want to repay us. How dare he even say something like that? Ooh, he really, ooh, he got up under my skin with his flappy little neck flaps. How dare he say something like that?
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. That needed to be said. And it's because it's 100% true. Mitch McConnell is basically one step away from a segregationist. And he can
Oh,
put all the different sort of like, I know so many people and I have so many friends, but your policies are shit. And yeah, I don't need to tell you. I don't need to tell the audience. We all know, but I'm just agreeing with you. Just 100% agreeing with you.
well, yeah, but then we all know McConnell has no backbone, even with Trump, just to see him flip flop, to tell Obama, well, we should wait to appoint to appoint like the Supreme Justice Court person until the next election, but then to literally come out and say, well, Trump should appoint them immediately as possible. It's like, are you serious? As
Mm-hmm.
if people don't have Google, or else we don't remember what you fucking said 5 years ago. Are you serious?
No, no, if you just understand that the goal of the Republican Party right now is to reorganize the way we do elections to guarantee a racist patriarchy of the most rich men, Christian Protestant men, run the country forever and ever, no matter what the demographics of America are, everything they do makes sense.
Yeah, and they're such hypocrites. Like, I don't trust them. I don't believe anything that they say. This the party of small government actually supports big government when it's in their favor. It's just
Yeah,
no
they tried.
integrity.
Yeah, look what the Republicans did on abortion with criminalizing legal abortion in other states. If women residents of was it Alabama leave the state to obtain a legal procedure that they come home, they would be arrested under that law if it went
Oh
into effect.
God, that is
Yes.
just how could that even be legal?
Well, it's being challenged for constitutionality as we speak, but the fact is that it was Republicans who passed that legislation, mostly men, white men.
That's so crazy. Like, and especially their main argument for states' rights is, well, you don't have to live here. But if you're criminalizing it when people go out of state, then how does that still fly?
Yeah, it's Handmaid's Tale stuff. Scary,
They just
scary
want to
stuff.
kill women.
Like,
Like,
they just want to keep us in our place, which is keeping the house clean and taking care of their kids, and then making their dinner, and then keeping them company when they retire, and providing sex, of course. Sex provision, very important role.
yeah, just have us as domestic slaves, basically.
Well, there is the Marxist critique of marriage is basically romance is a way to lie women into providing free labor, both from their bodies in terms of reproduction and keeping the house and the husband, in the 1800s, fed in the house in order so that he could go out and do work all day long.
Oh, yeah.
Romance is just a lie to get women to do all that shit for free.
And especially the way that romance has been sold to us,
Mm-hmm.
even in the modern day. Like, there's a lot of women, even in dating, will provide those same benefits to men that are unfaithful. They're uncommitted, but women have just been told, like, well, at least you have a man, at least you have a man. And it's like, but he ain't shit.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. I'd be better off without him. I would have less laundry, fewer dishes. My food bill would be lower. I'd have more free time.
right. Like, I think there's a study or an article that came out that said single moms have less housework than women in relationships.
You add another person and you add more labor. If that person doesn't do negate it, then they're only adding to it, right?
Yeah, it's just, you know, I'm an atheist, so I don't pray, but we still have to pray for heterosexual women. It's so hard out here.
Yeah, that's
Like, being
true.
straight is a curse.
It is, yeah, rough. It's a pretty rough landscape for, I think, yeah, relationships. Yeah, I know, but then I did see something recently. There was that thing on Twitter. It went around a newspaper, a British newspaper or English newspaper in the Victorian age had asked women readers of their paper why they were still spinsters. And some of them were like, well, because, I can't meet someone I like. But other ones were like, because I've been expected to do a lot more work and maybe for not somebody who's really great. Or if I wanted companionship, I'd get a dog. Or I haven't found anyone who's good enough for me yet. So, I mean, it's, and of course, these were women in their 20s, spinsters, in Victorian England. So I think actually it's not been easy. Well, of course, in those positions, women couldn't even work outside the house really, and so they had to marry almost as their career. Marriage was a career move because it was going to set you up financially until he died or you died. So at least we're not doing that shit. But I mean, that's not saying that we can't complain.
Yeah, and I feel like that's almost why Republicans are trying to regress us back to that
Yeah.
era, is because there's been such an increase of incels, and there are women, like you already said, like, we're raising our standards and we're saying we can provide financially for ourselves. So if you're not adding to our lives in a beneficial way. You know, if you're not helping out with the domestic chores or you're not making me happy, then what are you here for? And I really think Republicans are like, well, time to take back abortion. So when you bitches get pregnant, you'll have to depend on a man.
Yes, and then the next thing after that is contraception.
Yep.
Definitely. I mean, if you
Mm.
listen to Jordan Peterson, he talks, he sort of hints or even says it sort of more explicitly. There was the really embarrassing time where he was talking to Don Jr. about the excesses of like sexuality while Don was standing there with a woman he was having an affair with, but nobody knew it at the time, I don't think. But anyway, Peterson was saying something ridiculous like the birth control pill has only been around for 60 years and we still don't really know what the effects of it are. And he was basically making the argument that because women have this ability to control their fertility, it means that they can have sex with who they want. And because they can control their fertility, they're not forced because of fear of an unwed pregnant, of being pregnant while unwed, which is also not socially stigmatized as much. Yeah, they don't have to just settle down with a guy because they have to. And he was describing this almost as a lamentable condition and saying, yeah, this is why we have incels, because women now are free to control their reproductive abilities or their reproduction, and they don't have to fear pregnancy and marry a man for respectability. And it's really hurting these guys who can't get laid.
Well, I mean, he's actually kind of right, but he's right for the wrong
Right.
reason.
Yeah.
Like he thinks like that it's a bad thing that that's happening, and it's like, no, that's actually good.
Yep.
It's good. You know, it's going to force men to have to reevaluate themselves. It's going to force them to bring more to the table, to be better people as a whole, to present themselves better. And that's a good thing. And so many men complain about that. And I tell them, like, look, we've been doing this for like ever. We've
Yes.
always had to put so much effort into our appearance. We've always had to keep a clean home. We always had to be nice and respectable. It's time for you guys to join in the party. Like, it's not that hard.
Yeah, did you see the same headline? It was sort of like, "Oh my goodness, look, isn't this horrible? All of these men are having cosmetic surgery to look better because they're incels." Did you see that headline? And I was just
Yes.
like, "I'm sorry, have you looked at plastic surgery since the 1970s and 80s? What do you think women have been doing for the last several decades of our life? You know, of yes. Why is this now suddenly a crisis because men are doing it? Women do those all the time."
And then too, like, if you're a piece of shit and you honestly think your chances of mating will be better to go under a knife, I hope your surgery wound gets infected. Um, I hope that you suffer for a long time, that the scar tissue never heals. Because even if women, you know, fall in love with your appearance, the minute you start being a misogynist asshole, most of them are gonna leave.
Yep. Yep.
Like the issue is that you hate women, not that you're ugly. There are ugly men who get women all the time.
Yeah. And I
Like,
think also there's a sort of sense of like, I should be having sex now. I'm entitled to sex, you know?
yes, yeah. That weird entitlement of, you know, why wouldn't she have sex with me? And it's like, well, because we don't have to.
Yeah.
Did
And
you
we
ever think
also, yes, yeah, exactly. And also, we need to change the culture that tells men that their masculinity is defined by sexual conquest. That's also a big part of the problem, is that
yeah.
these guys are being raised, being told that this is how they demonstrate they're a man, and then they're not successful, so they get resentful, and it becomes a terrible circle. I was actually, I mean, I don't want to, I wouldn't want to make this joke for actual like women hating misogynistic gross incels, but just for like the guys who maybe don't have a lot of confidence in their, you know, because they're in their early 20s or whatever else, maybe we should set up, you and me, we should do this as a business venture. We should, now she's gonna hear me like, what the hell are you talking about, Christy? It'd be like Tinder, but for cougars. Just call it cougar. And it could be women who are older, who don't want to bother with a relationship, but would like to sort of mentor a younger man, kind of as a sisterhood move, you know, like show them how to kiss properly, how to go down properly, how to be a you know, just like sort him out and then send him back into the world, you know?
Oh, yeah. Because I mean, they need the experience, you know, they need to be taught that the pleasure of a woman actually matters.
Yes.
I don't know if you were like on Twitter that one day where that sexual expert, her video about how to please a woman went viral. There were so many replies of guys talking about, well, why does that matter? Why do I need to know where the clitoris is? And it's like, are you kidding
Oh.
me? Like, you have sex with women and you don't care whether or not they climax? Like, what?
Like if you say, why should anyone care where the clitoris is? Like that, you canceled. Like
Yeah.
what? Just no. Just big old nope. Moving on. Way to declare yourself is not worthy of dating. That's basically like, uh, imagine the equivalent of a woman going, why do I have to pay attention to his dick?
Yeah, seriously. Just imagine if women would just be into the foreplay and then she's like, well, I got what I needed.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Yeah, literally.
But that was it ever.
Yeah. And the thing is, they were saying it so proudly. Like they were not
Oh,
ashamed at all. That's the scary part.
that's another norm that has to change. Yeah,
Yeah.
and definitely like taking care of your partner's needs well. Oh, you'll get rave reviews, you'll get return visits. You will do so much better in life if you care about another person's happiness before your own, or make their happiness part of your happiness. That's the best way to do it. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be either or. It can be a both. But yeah,
Yeah.
some people don't get that.
And it
Like,
all boils down to just not hating women.
yeah, that's a good place to start, definitely. And then respecting them. And yeah, but it is strange to me too, because misogyny, as defined as the hatred of women, really doesn't describe what misogyny truly is. Because you can not actively hate women, but be a misogynist by having contempt. And I think it's not hatred, it's contempt, because it's bound up with power and like relations of power. And if you have contempt for women in thinking that they have their best roles are in the home, or they're defined by their biological reproduction, or they're not as smart, or they're too emotional, or they talk too much, or they care about their own orgasms, all of that contempt is misogyny. And hatred, it's just not the right word in my opinion for the emotion that actually is misogyny.
Yeah, and it's just so irrational. Like there's been so many times where either interacting with someone on Twitter where they can see my profile picture, or even like when I'm at work and I speak over the phones, and you can identify that I'm a woman by my voice. People just they just act so rude and condescendingly. Like that's what I've never understood. It's like you don't understand how much I know just by the tone of my voice or like the pitch of my voice. So why would you take it there? It's just, why do you feel like because you have a dick that you are just so much smarter than somebody that you don't even know?
Oh yeah. I mean, on Twitter, sometimes I'll get that. I'll be having an interaction with somebody. I'll ask them for some evidence, which is usually how I tend to call people out when they make wild claims. And there'll be a back and forth, and I'll challenge them and I'll present some counter evidence. And then at some point, and it's usually a guy, but you can't always tell with the avatars, they'll pull out the hun. Well, hun,
Oh
yada,
my
yada, yada, or well, sweetie. And at that point, that's
oh
when I start to giggle. That's when because for me, they've cracked. That's it. I've broken them. They're reduced to trying to wind me up about the fact that I'm a woman in order to distract from the fact that I'm kicking their ass. So for me, that moment, I always throw back a laugh gif at that point. Like, oh, so now you're gonna have to bring out the sexist references just to distract. Like, are you really reduced to that's where you are now already? And then usually it's always a woman laughing at them because they're trying to pull some kind of sexist bullshit by being demeaning. So for me, in that case, I turn that around on Twitter. On the phone, if someone did that to me, it would be different. But at least on Twitter, when they do that, I know I won.
And that's the thing, like, I don't know how you do it. I just don't know, because this one guy tweeted me a response video that he made of my Shout Out Black People Part 1. And he was like, oh, well, if you want to have a discussion, you can DM me and we can set up a time. And I told him, like, okay, but why would I want to do that?
Yeah.
Why would I want to talk to somebody who probably took what I said out of context anyway? And he's like, oh, darling, you didn't even see my video. You don't know what I said. And I was like, first of all, you don't know me. Do not refer to me as darling. And I repeated, like, I'm pretty sure you did because of what you're saying in the title. And also, why do I want to talk to you? Oh, pumpkin, blah, blah, blah. I didn't
Yeah.
even read the rest of the tweet. I would just blocked him because it's like, I know for a fact you wouldn't go up to a man who you didn't know and start calling him darling or pumpkin. You don't get to do that to me.
I
Like,
would,
either call me by my name or just speak to me like a stranger.
yep. I would only say to because so yes, I block him. I do eventually block the guys who call me sweetie and darling too. But I would just say that when you say back to him, this is my take. I don't want to tell you what to do, but this is my take. That's the reaction he's looking for because he wants to try to engage you on you being defensive about him trying to demean you. And that's why I always do the power switch of like, oh, that's so pathetic. Did you just call me darling? Are you looking for a girlfriend? You're so desperate. You're in the YouTube comments calling women darling, hoping they'll date you. Why don't you move along? Because obviously you have nothing interesting to say if all you can come up with is darling. And then I wait for him to reply back and see what he cried about, and then I would block him. So that's how I do it. But I'm vindictive.
Oh yeah, I think it depends, like, on the day and the
Yeah,
mood.
true.
Like, if
Yeah.
I'm in a good mood, I might play with him a little like that. But other days, it's like I don't have time for this because people who talk like that to other people online, they would never go up to your face acting like that.
Yeah, they're just trash. Like they're so not worth the emotional reactions. They've just shown themselves to be trash.
Oh
That's it.
yeah, yeah. And most of these
Yeah.
people, like, if they came up to me in person, I would literally turn around and walk the other way.
Hmm.
So it's like they would never have the privilege to talk to me otherwise.
They're trying to get your attention, especially if they're in your comment section. Like, notice me. Mm. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
also get that too, like a real sense on Twitter of entitlement for some people. Like, I want to know your opinion on X. I'm like, well, I don't really feel like giving an opinion on that. I don't know it well enough, whatever. And like, no, you have to tell me what you think. I'm like, I don't owe you shit. I don't have to come up with an opinion to make you happy or whatever. They say, they make some sort of claim and like that I challenge. And they go, well, why don't you go find the evidence? I'm like, no, it's not my claim. Like, I'm not going to do your work for you. If you can't do it, it's a crap argument. So what are you going to do? You're going to bow out. You can retract your comment or you can defend it. Those are your options. But like I said, I'm a total bitch on Twitter to those kinds of people. So, but that's also kind of off of the issue too. We've kind of drifted into Twitter battles now. I want to get focused back on where we were, which
No, but
is
yeah.
yeah, well, patronizing language. And yeah, well, I guess in some ways it's good to talk about different strategies for handling that because it does take an emotional toll. And I don't know that people, it took me years to build up my YouTube armor and a couple bearing brigadings and Sargon brigadings as well. But yeah, there are real people behind the content that is being posted, and some people in the comments, like, obviously their entire mission is to find the most hurtful thing they can think of and hurl it at that person. And it's just, YouTube is shitty.
Yeah, but I think men are also socialized in a certain way, like with negging.
Yeah.
I've never understand why some guys do it. And then there's even been times where like a group of men that don't even know each other will just see one guy negging and will kind of like join in on the negging like party. And it's like, what is going on? Like what's happening? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's like a group event then. Attracts more people.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's just
there's
God.
yeah, and
Like,
people say, oh, toxic masculinity isn't a real thing. I'm like, have you looked at how we ask boys to behave and how we pray, what kind of behaviors we praise in men in our culture? Some of them are great, but not all of them. Maybe we need to look at the ones that are not great because they end up hurting people.
oh yeah. And my favorite thing is when people talk about toxic femininity. It's like, oh, because a woman is a bitch, now
Well,
it's
yeah,
toxic femininity?
no. And I know they are desperate for this sort of false equivalence. If there is a toxic masculinity, there must be a toxic femininity. Why?
Yeah.
But the point of toxic masculinity is that it leads its patterns of norms or emotional responses that end up producing violent or harmful actions. And women are socialized to be passive, and if anything, to endure abuse and then be appraised for it. So no, in terms of just because some women are catty, that doesn't mean femininity is toxic. I mean, we can criticize it for some of its elements, but it's not toxic in the way that it ends up hurting other people.
Oh yeah. And I even read like a few articles that was saying that being a bitch for some women is like a defensive armor. You know, it's our way to navigate the world, to be taken seriously, and to get shit done.
Yeah, I mean, there was that great Tina Fey, Amy Pollard, is that her name? Bit when Hillary was running back in like 2007 or whatever, and someone called her a bitch or something, there was a debate about the word bitch, and Tina Fey just went, "Well, yeah, you want to know what? I'm a bitch, and so is this one over here," pointing at Amy, and she went, "Definitely." And she's like, "And you know why? Because bitches get stuff done."
Yeah. I
and
mean, it's the
all
only way.
And also, yeah, am I a bitch to some people on Twitter? Absolutely, but I don't go in being a bitch. I kind of always go in neutral, unless I'm like provoking someone, in which case, but I'm talking about if I in a general interaction, it is a response mechanism. It's not where I start. And it's definitely because of honey, sweetie, fisty, whatever other slurs get thrown at you. And this idea that what we're not supposed to be tough, yeah, like it's a double bind. We're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. We're supposed to stand up for ourselves, because that's how men stand up for themselves, and that's good. But when we do it, then we're unreasonable. A guy, when he stands up for himself, he's just defending his reputation, or he's speaking his mind, or whatever he wants to do. But when a woman does the exact same thing, oh, now she's a loudmouth, she's a bitch.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And I love when they come at you crazy and then you will like clap back at them and they'll be like, "Whoa, whoa, why are you being
Mm-hmm.
so hostile? Whoa." And it's like, did you honestly expect anything different with the way that you approached me?
Yeah, and also the trope too of the angry black women is so it must be in terms of like a delegitimization of righteous anger, right? Because
Oh,
of
I mean, I would even argue that it goes a little bit deeper because, on one hand, when we are accurately angry about something, people will write it off as, oh, well, you're just angry because you're black and you're a woman. But at other times, when there are situations where we're supposed to react with anger, a lot of the times we'll try to fight that stereotype by not being angry, and
Mhm.
that will create even more stress
Yep.
upon our psyches. And it's just really hard to try to navigate being deemed as emotionally rational when just as a woman alone, you're going to be emotionally overreactive to a lot of people's eyes anyway.
I agree. And when I look at Kamala, I see her actually the word I most associate with her when her image pops up into my mind is controlled.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
know that she's honed that in order to not have that thrown at her. I'm sure that's part of her character is that stereotype working against it in order to be acceptable.
Oh,
But
yeah.
hyper.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. With the amount of people who will just run up on her, like that guy when she was talking on that stage, and then that woman in
Oh.
the airport, it's like, wow, like kudos to her because I couldn't be the one. I'm glad she has people around her to protect her because people act way too familiar with her.
Yes, I forgot that guy just walked up as a sort of white progressive dude and just walked up and took the mic out of her hand.
Yeah. And then people just couldn't, well, people were like, well, he did the same thing to Bernie Sanders. And it's like, it's different for
Yes.
Bernie.
Yeah, the optics and just the power dynamics and the racial dynamics are all different. So different in those two cases. Wow. Yeah. Um, ugh, but anyway, I did you want to take? I have. Sorry. Did you want to take some questions for the chat if people have them? Because I think we've been going for like an hour and a half now. But I don't know if you have a timetable. If you have to be somewhere.
No, I can take some questions.
Okay, so there'll be a little bit of a lag. I don't know if there'll be any questions. I didn't ask them. I didn't kind of prep people, but they've been very active in the chat, a lot of engagement. So before we left, I wanted to give them an opportunity. If they had anything they wanted us to comment on. Someone also liked the idea, by the way, and we're going to call it Cougar, Cougr, is that app where cougars can meet up with young men for fun. Um,
Yeah, because there are sugar mamas, they are out there. You just have to present well and just, learn your strokes,
mhm.
just play with her, wine and dine with her coins, and you'll be good to go.
Yep. I think, yeah, technology could maybe solve part of not all of the incel problem, obviously, because attitudes are, you can't fix attitudes until they're fixed. But in terms of just some of the awkwardness and yeah, and there's a lot of mature women, I'm sure, out there would would definitely be interested in dating someone, or briefly dating someone 20 years younger than just for the bragging rights.
Yeah, just for the company alone,
Yeah, no
definitely.
fun. It's been going the other direction forever, right? And that's also why men in that age cohort complain that they're competing with men of much older ages, but they're not widening their pool. They need to widen their pool. All right, got a question. What do you think of the candidate Mike Gravel, if you know anything about him?
I know nothing about Mike Gravel. I'm interested to see what his platform's about, though.
I also am in the same position, but there's so many candidates. I only really know the names that have, national recognition. So I'm going to learn a lot from the debates as well. So we both know nothing. Um, I think because of your avatar with your, is that hair or is that ears like that you're wearing with a headband on top?
That's I put my dreads in like two buns at the top of my head.
Okay, because someone called you Miss Cat, and I think that's because it looks really cute because you kind of have a cat ears look going on there. So I think that's what they called you. Who who's in your top three? Oh, top three for the Democratic candidate, Eva? Yeah, highly critical. Who's in your top three for the Dems?
Ooh, well, obviously Harrison Warren. Um, for my number three spot, that's a good question. Um, I've been leaving that open because I like some of what Cory Booker says. I like a little bit of Andrew Yang, but his gripes about identity politics have kind of turned me off. Um, who else? I mean, if Sanders would get his shit together, then he could be number three. Um, let's see. I mean, Beto O'Rourke, he's like a little bit too centrist for me. Like he's trying to gain the centrist vote, and that turns me off as well. Um, let's see. Um, I heard Gillibrand is okay, but yeah, she said a couple of things in the past that kind of turned me off as well. Um, I mean, maybe Buttigieg, maybe because I think most of his platform's okay. It's just again, I get really turned off when any Democratic candidate tries to appeal to like uh racist voters or like the right wingers because we know that they are not compatible with Democratic platforms at all. So
Yeah,
yeah, my third spot's pretty open.
cool. Oh, thanks for yeah. Third spot's pretty open. That's a completely fair answer, especially I think at this point. Like this time next year, we'll be pretty close to the convention, so I think we've all known already. But oh my gosh, can you imagine in a year's time? We're gonna be getting near the end of the primary. It's gonna be a real person. Ooh, okay. We'll see how it goes. Someone in the chat, Chris with a lot of numbers asks me, do I think TERFs and incels are similar in term of thought process? I don't think so. I think well, TERF means trans exclusionary radical feminist. And so TERFs, I never can understand how TERFs can be radical in their feminism, which means to want to unpack and undermine gender norms and roles, and then also be essentialist on biology, like in a bad way. So I think that the TERF thing is different from incels, which are more broadly hostile to women as a group for reasons of resentment and kind of like this I want you and I want to love you, but you won't have me, so I hate you kind of weird pathology, which I think is very different. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would say the only similarities that they have is that they're both misogynist in a certain type of way.
Yeah, fair enough.
Um, I will say there was a very brief time I was very close to becoming a TERF because I've witnessed misogyny coming from trans women, specifically like conservative ones on YouTube. And briefly, I did come across arguments of saying that, quote unquote men trying to be women is threatening like actual womanhood, but after learning more about trans rights and about the trans plight and struggles here in America, um, I would say they're different, but TERFs are like, I think they're worse in a way. Like, I expect men to hate women. I expect incels to be vitriolic in their rhetoric. But for other women who claim to be feminists to hate trans women,
That's a
like,
great.
yeah, one of the most marginalized women, like,
Yeah.
just this year alone, there's been like 3 or 4 trans women who were murdered,
Yeah.
and especially one out here in Dallas, it's scary. And cis women, we have to protect trans women. We have
Mhm.
to demand that they get included with us. We have to demand that men respect them the same way we demand that men to respect us as cishet women. Like, they're a part of our movement. And I don't feel like you're a feminist if you don't include trans women.
Yeah. I'm just gonna co-sign if I could all of the above of that. Like that speaks exactly to my emotional framework on that issue better than I could have. So thank you. Yeah,
My
really, really
pleasure.
good. So Dataport Doll says the core of turfism is that women's only bargaining chip with the patriarchy is that they can withhold sex. So that's what makes them radicals, checking out of the system. I would kind of, I would disagree with that. I mean, you're going to make me pull up my Wikipedia thing on radical feminism. You're not talking about radical feminism. That's what make them radical, but not that they're radical feminists. Okay, sorry, I'm not. Got it. I misunderstood, but I worked through it and I figured out what you meant. You're just saying they're radical in that their view, not they're radical in their feminism. Got it. Okay. Sometimes the word limit hurts. It can be difficult.
But yeah,
Um,
Alyssa Milano, she found out the problems with the whole withhold sex to get better rights thing.
yeah, that was just, it was such a second wave failed argument. It didn't work in the second wave. It's only like ever worked in fiction in one Greek play, but that's because it's not based on reality. Um, yeah, it just, activism, sex strikes don't work that way. Unless you're a union of sex workers where it's legalized and all of the sex workers in the city go on strike. That would be a proper sex strike. That's the only way I could think of it actually working, possibly.
Yeah. And then
Um,
there are pick-me's, women who have internalized their own misogyny. They
yeah,
would still have sex with all these men. So what's the point?
yep, precisely. Radical feminism is something I am for. Yeah, I also think there's really good critiques of gender in radical feminist thought. So I don't have a. That's why it makes me sad that the radical feminism is even part of the word turf. But I also understand exactly why it is. So yeah. I think. Do you have other things that you wanted to bring up? I don't want to cut this short. You said you had a couple questions for me, which you asked, but I didn't want to cut you short. If you had more, highly critical.
Um, nope. No, I would say that's it. It's going to be interesting to see the primary debates, to see who gets to make the cut as like a legitimate candidate and who gets to fall to the wayside. So I'm excited for that.
Well, I'm going to be away next week, so there aren't going to be any happy hours. But maybe I'm sure Kevin would be open to this. If you're going to be watching the primary debates and I'll be watching the primary debates, maybe we could have you on a happy hour to talk about that after they happen and get everyone's take on who did well, who didn't, how the formats worked, what the 2 nights, did they draw the same audience, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that'd be cool. If Kevin will have me.
Oh yes, definitely. And also, when we need another American on the panel to kind of balance out his British opinions. So
Oh yeah, he is across the pond. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, so this has been so much fun, and yeah, I mean, I could go for hours and hours, but I figure you have a life. I should probably, and my legs have been sat, and my feet are going numb, so I'm going to need to stretch them. But yeah, it would be great if we could follow this conversation up with a happy hour. I think that would be really, really nice. So I'll make that happen. I have the power. Yay! All right. So once again, people can go to your channel, which is just linked in this description box below. Before we go, is there anything that you're going to be putting out soon that they can look forward to? Or I know you just said you did that series. Is there anything else? Yeah, we want to shout out the most recent two-parter that you did one more time.
Yeah. So the recent two-parter that I did was Shout Out Black People. In the first part, I kind of go on a rant about why it's important to shout out Black people, especially being on the left and fighting racism as a whole as a part of your political agenda. For the second part, it's a long video with timestamps in the description where I give out recommendations for Black content creators and podcasters. And then for a new video that is in the works that I'm working on now, I'm going to be talking about the Madonna whore complex, that dichotomy that men will put women into and how that affects us. So be on the lookout for that.
All right, well, and in the spirit of your part one, which actually some random geek has posted a link to in the live chat, so people in the live chat can just click that link if they want to go watch it immediately after this show. Thank you, Town Crier, some random geek, for that. Oh, and part two, he put both of them, so even people in the future can just click on that and go right to the videos you were talking about. You want to shout out some Black creators here on my channel to sort of live the spirit of that video?
Hell yeah. So I would say most notably is Cat Black. She's back to, making videos and stuff. And she is the person that I would give the credit to for checking me about my own transphobia and educating me on trans rights. So shout out to her.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. That's great to know. And also, yeah, shout out.
Yeah, totally. Um, who else? Off the top of my head, in terms of like a specific brand of feminism, there's this channel and she goes by ABM Talks. Now, she's a dating coach, but the topics that she talks about is about like confidence and how to live your best life and how to put your best foot out there in terms of giving first impressions and telling women to raise their standards and to enforce their boundaries. I love her. So if you're into any of that, I would definitely say to check her out. Um, who else would be a good well, if you're into like the beauty community or things like that, I would have to recommend Jackie Ina and Alyssa Ashley. um I love them. They're really well known, and there's recently a bit of a drama going on with them and the greater beauty community. But yeah, other than that, I would say for a miscellaneous recommendation, I would say this channel, Don BBW. Um, he has like millennial type of humor. He's gone viral several times. I really enjoy his content. He makes me laugh so much. Um, and for a Let's Player, I would say I would shout out this new YouTuber, brand new. She started her channel a few months ago. Her name is Private Blue, and she plays a lot of indie games that I really enjoy as well. So
Cool. I'm going to do my part. I did a little bit. We had the happy hour. Well, it's all hip hop stuff because that's my framework. And also, I think they're great creators. All the people I'm going to shout out. So it wasn't actually a happy hour. Kevin and I did a hangout, and it was really depressing listening to Dave Cullen from Computing Forever. So we put on a reaction video from No Life Shack because he's got great reactions. He loves music. He does reactions to hip hop, to country music, to heavy metal music. You can see how much he loves the moment of song when he's in it. So his channel is great. Then also Screw Life Jean. I find it's not Jean. It's just spelled like the French Jean. He's a hip hop artist and he does reaction videos. He loves to do battle rap. He gets in so many battle rap fights. Like every couple of months, he's doing a new diss track to somebody or other, but because he loves the game, and I love his love of the game. And he got great reaction videos as well. And then another great channel is called Script Work. There's two men who do hip hop reviews, and they also really love it. They make their own music. They've got an album coming out too, or has just been released, which you'll hear when you go to their videos. They sample some parts of their songs, and you can check them out on iTunes. So yeah, I'm trying to be in the spirit as well.
yeah. And again, like I just really want to thank you, like thank you for this hangout. It's been really awesome. And thank you for like doing your part, Christy, because you're so consistent with your views. You know what I'm saying? Like there are so many people who like to say that they're not racist and that they're anti-racist, but at the same time, they're not like taking those small steps to make a difference for individual people's lives. So shout out to you too.
I'm blushing. Thank you for the thank you. Oh, my heart is glowing and my cheeks are pink. Thank you so much. Like that was like the verbal hug, like a 5-minute verbal hug. Thank you so much for saying that. That means so much. And thanks to you for coming on. And I'm so glad that I found your Lawrence Krauss video. That one asshole brought us together. And I do I find you, if I can return, if we can have a little, yeah, like a mutual admiration society here. You're so thoughtful, and you speak with such a sincerity from a considered position. And even when you speak with righteous anger, it's because you care, and that is very much your authenticity. Very much comes across in your content, and it's something I admire about you very much. So.
Aw, thank you. Like, it's so funny because sometimes I question myself, like, am I the right person to be saying all this stuff? Because, I'm not an academic at all, but at the same time, I read a lot of academics and I watch a lot of their stuff, and it's just like, am I the right person? But I mean, to
Yes.
hear you say that, like, thank you, like, it, reinforces that I'm doing the right stuff.
I actually think the people who are autodidactic, the people who teach themselves things, like when they get nerdy about stuff and they really deep dive it because they care about it and they're passionate, those are actually like some of the best people to talk about issues. Rather than someone who, oh, yeah, I got a business degree, so I can talk about this theory in economics. It's like, well, yeah, maybe you do, but in terms of, yeah, don't ever feel like, you know, if you research something and you have your facts right and you're morally right, yeah, you are the right person. You are definitely the right person because that truth needs to come out and you are the perfect vehicle to deliver it. So if you ever wonder, I'm in your brain going, yes, just make the video or write the blog or apply for the job. Like, yes, even if they don't see it, you are still the right person. And that's the thing. Some people might not see it, but you are the right person. But that's their fault for not seeing it.
See, now I have to get that tattooed right on my heart.
Maybe try it with like ink at first and make sure it works before you commit. Oh, this has been delightful. Oh, we're gonna have so much fun on the happy hour. Except Kevin's gonna bring up dicks way more, but I think you'll roll with that. It'll be okay.
Well, I mean, um, I can be comfortable with it because especially I've watched your happy hours before,
Yeah.
so I kind of get the gist of his humor. So I'll be
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited now to see where you bring. All right. Well, again, go check out Highly Critical on her channel. Come and visit us when she's in the happy hour when I arrange for her visit. And yeah, thanks for coming on. And I know what I say to then. All right. Thanks for people in the chat for being awesome. Thank you to my guest, Highly Critical, for being awesome. Thanks to people in the future who are watching all the way to the end of the video. And I've been Christy, and all of you guys have been awesome. So we'll do the bit. Goodbye from me, and goodbye from Highly Critical. Say goodbye, Highly Critical. Go subscribe. No, wait. Say goodbye, Highly Critical. Go subscribe to my channel.
Bye. Go sub to my channel. Thank you guys for listening and watching. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Christy. I hope everyone has a lovely day today.
She did the bit and then some. Okay. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.